All information given in this episode is for educational purposes and should not be tried prior to consulting a licensed physician and or certified state or accrediting bodies. We encourage all listeners to research, talk, and make all inquiries to all of the important professionals and governing bodies before acting on any information heard on the De La Fit podcast. Any action taken by any listener is done by and under their own omission and action, whether conscious to the results, positive or not.
To the De La Fit Podcasts, 360 degrees of holistic fitness and health, all in one podcast.
Salutations and proclamations. It is I, it is you, it is us, it is we. Together we make up the digital family that is the De La Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Philly's #1 son, aka the Body Alchemist, Sun Moon Bay, bringing you another podcast excursion. Welcome one, welcome all to the 360 degrees of holistic fitness and health that is the De La Fit Podcast. We have a great show for you today. My guest is a Miss Mary Sheila. She's going to be talking to us about mindful eating. Why is it important for us to observe this practice? What can it do for you? And how can it help you have a better life? Which it definitely can. It's going to be an interesting conversation. We're going to get into that as soon as possible. Just want to take the time out to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. I know there's many things going on all over the world. Earthquakes in the West Coast and hurricanes in the heartlands and heat wave in the East Coast. But you know what? I'm hoping that out of all the chaos that's going on throughout the world, with everything going on, you can use this moment to be a moment of peace. You know, that's what's most needed for everybody out there. We need moments of peace. We need clarity. We need communication. And it seems as though there's so much going on. My cousin is saying it's the retrograde. Millennials, look it up, Google it. I'm not going to be talking about that. But we're going to be having some great positive conversation dealing with mindfulness. I said early in 2019 at the beginning of it, the writing on the wall was about mindfulness and progression. And that conversation has continued throughout 2019. Mindfulness is key, and it's mindfulness about everything. I've had the privilege of having some very great guests come on the show and speak about mindfulness and how it can be implemented in every part of one's life. How to begin the practice, which is so important because it seems as though everything is trying to pull us out of ourselves. It's trying to take us from looking at ourselves, from really taking the time to see what's going on within. When we stop looking at what's going on inside, that's when we truly lose ourselves. That's the most important. With everything that's going on around us, in front of us, on our cell phones, computers, tablets, with everything that's being projected and shown to us, mindfulness is key. How many of us have heard the term know thyself? You can't know yourself if you're not mindful of yourself, your feelings, your emotions. So with that being said, we're going to get into this interview. I hope you all enjoy it. I enjoyed having the conversation immensely. So let's get into it. Hey, you. With the earbuds in their ear. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? When I was trying to get my podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places people like to listen? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid to podcasts. I like to upload my episodes directly to the app and then promote. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, make money doing it. Go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. Salutations and proclamations. It's Philly's number one son, aka the Body Alchemist, Sun Moon Bay, host of the Daily Fit Podcast, letting you know that you can now tune in from some of your favorite platforms. That's right, iTunes lovers, Google Play Music listeners, and Spotify addicts. Simply to tune in, go to the search section in your favorite platform and type in Daily Fit Podcast. We haven't forgotten about you too, YouTube lovers or SoundCloud floaters. It's the same thing. Go to your favorite app or platform and type in the search menu, De La Fit Podcast.
You're now tuned in to the De La Fit Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the De La Fit Podcast. We are here and we are going to talk about a very interesting topic which is mindful eating. Now, for many of you out there, you're probably like, what is mindful eating? You hear the term, it's mentioned a lot. They have more trainings on mindfulness in itself. But I know many individuals don't quite understand what that is. We talk about it here on the podcast, but there are still many individuals out there that just don't understand what mindfulness is and how also it can connect to eating and nutrition. Well, we have a special guest with us. We have Miss Mary Gonnella, and she is a certified holistic nutrition consultant and a practitioner of Ayurveda. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And she's going to be walking us through mindful eating, the pros of it, what it can do for you, and how it can impact your health and your nutrition overall. So, Miss Mary, are you on the line? Are you with us?
I am here. Thank you very much.
It is our pleasure to have you here. I know it's early morning for you. It's actually 7 a.m. where you are, and it's 10 a.m. here in the East Coast, but we thank you so much for being committed to your path and your purpose and to joining us here. I know it can be difficult. I'm not a morning person.
Well, it helps that it's summertime and the birds are all outside waking me up. So it's all good.
Excellent. So, and I hope I pronounced it correctly, your last name.
So my full name is Mary Sheila Gonnella, and I go by Mary Sheila, actually. So just like your Sun Moon, I'm Mary Sheila.
All right. Well, I will call you Mary Sheila.
Awesome.
All right. So, and you practice something. Let's start with that, because I just want to talk about it because I saw it and I thought it was interesting, and I'm going to try to pronounce it again. You practice something called Ayurveda. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, you did good. Ayurveda is that's the way I say it. And Ayurveda is the science of medicine from India. And it is what's really cool about Ayurveda, kind of like what you're doing here with your podcast, is it's really rooted in self-care. So it's sort of the opposite of our maybe traditional healthcare system in the last whatever amount of years, where we didn't really know and understand the body, and, you know, the doctor knew all, and we took the pill, we did what the doctor said, and now we're in this place of really more self-investigation. Like, what do I need? We can look things up online, we can learn more, we can, learn from podcasts like yours. So Ayurveda is the science of medicine that is rooted in self-care, in how do you care for yourself. And food is medicine. Herbs are medicine. Your emotions are addressed. That's a big part of Ayurveda, is you address your emotions, because oftentimes our thoughts become our emotions, and our emotions can sometimes settle in the body and lead to different conditions. So it has a really wonderful way of looking at the body, and it's also elemental medicine. So we are the elements of the earth, or the elements, right? So
right.
Within our environment, right, we have ether, which is space. Mm-hmm. In the body, we have space, and space for things to move along through the body. Like, we have a lot of space in our lungs for the air to come in.
Right.
We have space in our intestinal tract for the food to move through. We also have air, which, we take in the oxygen. We need the oxygen. We leave room for oxygen in every single cell. Pretty much every single cell needs oxygen, and oxygen can flow through the blood in our red blood cells. We also have fire, right? We're warm, and every single cell has mitochondria, which is like our little internal engines of every cell. And then we also have our fiery digestive organs. Like, we turn food into us. We do that. Like, the stomach is very fiery, the liver is very fiery. So we have that fire. And then just like the earth is 70% water, we're water. We're 70% water. And so water is the transport for all the nutrients, for all the waste. And then our body is earth, right? It's the solid structure that gives us form. So Ayurveda is rooted in elemental medicine, just like Chinese medicine is. So if you feel like, something's out of balance, like if you're too congested or mucousy, or somebody's anemic, or if they're too dry, right? We address it and say, oh, it's too dry, you need more hydration, hydrating foods, hydrating beverages. Oh, you're too wet, mucousy, maybe you need more dry food. You're too fiery. Oh, let's cool you down with these foods. You're too cold, let's warm you up with these foods. So that's the science of Ayurveda. Sort of in a nutshell for me is like really using the elements to guide you in your choices.
I knew from the moment that I read your bio that this was going to be a great conversation. Just from your definition and how you explain it, I thought it was very interesting. And before I get into some of these other questions, I think it's interesting how you framed it in the part of we are the total of our universe that we live in. So it's kind of interesting the fact you said, the world, or I should say the earth, is 70% water, and yes, it's 70% water that is in us. So what do you think the things that are taking place in the world? Because to me, it's kind of like a direct correlation. If the polar ice caps are melting and certain things are taking place, that's got to affect us and how we are in our balance.
Absolutely. The earth is in crisis right now, right? And there's the changing of the climate. And then you look at all of us, and I have, you and I have more the context of, being in the United States, right? You look at all of us and we are, really stressed in general. And we're trying to, a lot of people are kind of just in surviving, right? And then we also we see a lot of disease, chronic disease, a lot of cancer. We're all touched by that. So the stress is when we are stressed, we're producing a lot of cortisol, and over time that's very hot and dry. So it kind of dries out the tissue and it doesn't allow things to flow as well. So things can get kind of stuck. And then, in that, sometimes we're not carving, and this is like a perfect segue for mindful eating in a sense, because when we're stressed, we're just grabbing on the go. We're just grabbing something. It's not the same as just really the intentional, like, what am I feeding my body? How is this working? So, we have that. So, and then we just see the earth with the toxicity, and then that toxicity, it becomes part of us too, because we're eating, whatever we're eating has a lot of those toxins in it, and it's building up in our systems as well. And, it's disrupting a lot of our systems. It's very disruptive to the hormonal system. And, and our detoxification pathways have a harder time getting rid of everything. So absolutely, we're such a reflection of the bigger picture. And it kind of reminds me of that saying of, I wanted to change the world, so I start with myself,
Right.
It does make a big difference what we put in the body and our thoughts and our emotions and, how we care for ourselves. And then it reflects out to then, those choices that we make. If we make better choices or more sustainable choices, then it does impact, especially when it's more collective, what's happening in the bigger picture.
Right. I totally agree. So for our listeners out there who are ignorant to what mindfulness is, if you can give a kind of a brief definition on what that is and how mindful eating is connected to that.
So to me, mindfulness is the ability to know and to sort of act upon the fact that we always have a choice.
Okay.
And right, we always have a choice in the matter. And a lot of times we're just doing. And to me, mindfulness is that little space that we can open up between our actions, within our actions, of like, you know, so that what we choose to do is very intentional. So it's that like, wow, I'm, you know, mindfulness is here. It's funny because I teach a mindful eating class that I've taught for, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years now. Mm-hmm. And we were crafting affirmations.
Okay.
And one of the first people in the class said, I am grateful for mindfulness. And I was like, oh my God, I love that. And I took that as my own, so that sometimes when I find myself doing maybe 2 or 3 things, multitasking,
right,
I say, I'm grateful for mindfulness. And it brings me back to, okay, wow, what am I doing right now? Like maybe I'm chewing something, right, and I'm cutting something, and I'm listening to something, and I'm, you know, so it brings me back. And so to me, mindfulness, it's that knowing we have a choice, and, you know, and I couple it with, and that tiny little space to recognize and acknowledge that and choose whatever it is, you know?
Right. So in a sense, kind of like know yourself and the deeper parts of yourself, in a sense.
Yeah, and kind of like check in with self, right?
Right. Something we don't, I should say, I don't think we are taught, or it's not a common thing to do. And you said it prior, we're in such a go-go society that it's like, when do you ever check in with yourself, you know, to see how you're doing or what you're doing? So exactly. My question next would be, what is the connection with mindful eating? You know, why is it important, and why should we start to practice it?
So the amazing thing about being a human, or just even being any life form, right, is the fact that, you know, we eat food and it really does become us. So that whole thing is of, you know, you are what you eat is really true.
Right.
And when I teach kids, sometimes I say, so we don't want to be fast, cheap, and easy, right?
Right.
We want to be more intentional with what we're putting in our body. So if we come back to that, like, what is mindful eating? Mindful eating is a choice. We're choosing what we can eat. It's having that personal responsibility of what it is that we're putting into our body. Because for most of us, you know, we might go through life kind of as kids, like eating whatever and eating what we want. Because sometimes, you know, most kids are like, I don't want to eat that. I'm not going to eat that. I just want this other thing. And it's, you know, usually something that's more pleasurable. So we go through life, and usually we get to a point where we say, wow, like, I want to eat maybe better foods and more healthy foods, or I have, you know, weight that I want to lose, or this condition that I want to address. And I got the memo. Like, you know, the sodas are out, the water's in, and I need to eat healthier or whatever. So mindful eating, again, to me, it's really owning the fact that we have a choice. And it's not necessarily needing to follow, like, you know, some really rigid plan. It's that, you know, sometimes I tell my clients, like, am I hungry?
Right.
How hungry am I? What am I hungry for? Right? There's that little space that we created before a meal of saying, like, oh, I need something. What does my body need? And then, you know, going back to the elements, am I hot? Am I cold? Am I wet? Am I dry? Well, we might not always know, you know, because sometimes we're just going through the motions. We're not always checking in with our body. But the more we start to kind of ask those questions, the more our body is going to start to tell us, you know, maybe what we need, what we're craving. And, you know, sometimes our cravings are not necessarily, you know, it's like, oh, I'm really craving chocolate. It's not like, oh, I must really need it. But it's also just acknowledging that.
Okay.
And, you know, I think, too, when it comes to mindful eating, I'll just say another thing is that we have, like, the amazing thing about our body, like, when we're on go all the time, we're basically in survival in a sense. Like, our nervous system is turned on to the sympathetic nervous system, which means, like, our hormonal system, which is also rules our digestive tract, is like, you know, make sure you are safe, If I'm like driving my car, my body is in the sympathetic, and it's going to keep me safe. So I pay attention on the road. My senses are up, right?
Right.
When I eat, or when I rest, or when maybe I meditate, when I take deep breaths, my nervous system, part of the nervous system starts to relax, and I start to go into my parasympathetic nervous system, which rules my digestive tract, which has more neurons, right? The gut-brain connection has more neurons than even, like more than my brain. It's considered the largest part of the nervous system is in the gut. Okay. And that's where all my digestive juices start to come out when I'm in that mode. So if I'm back in my car and I've got my meal sitting next to me and I'm driving.
We hope you're enjoying the interview thus far with Mary Sheila as she discusses mindful eating habits. Just a quick reminder to like, follow, and share the De La Fit podcast. Thank you, and now back to our regular scheduled program.
I'm eating. None of those juices, some of them are probably going to get turned on just from the taste factors because, the tastes are going to kind of stimulate digestion.
Right.
Like my stomach acid's not going to be producing as much stomach acid. My pancreas, all of my enzymes are not going to be as robust. But if I say, what is mindful eating? Maybe mindful eating is that, like, creating that little space before a meal. Oh, I'm going to sit and eat a meal. I'm going to sit and I'm going to look at it. I'm going to bring it in through my eyes, which is going to help turn on my digestive system, because my digestive system is like the control center of the digestive system is the hypothalamus in the brain. So it turns on my digestive system. All my juices start to go. I smell the food. That helps too. I take some deep breaths, which helps get me into the parasympathetic mode. And my digestion starts to turn on. It starts to activate. All my juices start to flow. And basically, instead of being in fight or flight, I bring myself into rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic mode.
Right.
And it allows everything to start to secrete and all my juices to going. And it means I'm also going to get more out of my food. My digestion is going to turn on, and I have all these mucous membranes. They're going to all secrete, and it's also extremely protective, right? It's because a lot of times when we eat, or if we're stressed all the time and we're in that other mode, the lining of our gut starts to thin, and then people start to run into problems. So it becomes this whole cascade. So it's kind of amazing what we can do when we say, okay, I'm going to just be more mindful with this meal, because then we think about all those other goals like, gosh, I want to lose some weight. I want to start eating better. All of a sudden, we're eating a meal and we're realizing maybe halfway through the meal, I'm noticing I'm full. I don't need to eat all of this. Or I'm chewing my food better, things like that.
So, Mary, I think I understand where you're going with this. For some of the individuals out there, some of the listeners, because I know I have friends of mine that's going to be like, that all sounds well and good, but isn't eating just eating? How can they, I think you've already began to make those connections, but how can mindful eating help them with their everyday life, or help them throughout their everyday life? Because I think you definitely touched on the importance of it and why. But I don't, for a lot of people, I think they might think it's too much, in the sense of, it's almost like, well, am I going to have to start meditating, and, am I going to have to start doing yoga? I feel like many people, they are caught in that space of, am I going to have to pause? Or I don't have the time. I think that's the word I'm looking for. It's that space and time. I don't have the time for that. I have to get it in and get it out. Why is it important that we start to focus on that for our everyday?
Yeah, totally. And I hear that all the time about, I don't even have time to barely eat my lunch. I don't have time to step away from the computer or to do whatever it is. And I get that, because I can get into that mode too. But
same here.
Nobody, the thing to remember, first of all, is nobody is going to give you the time that you need except for you. Nobody's going to do that for you. And we do have the power and the control to do that. So there is that. And what's so interesting, I think, when you start to ask that question is, oftentimes what we do in one part of our life starts showing up in all other parts of our lives. And the thing about the gut is, our digestive tract and mindful eating, and you've probably heard this, the gut is your second brain.
Yes.
Right? So, when we're embryos developing, it's the same exact tissue, and there's nerves that connect the brain and the gut. So oftentimes, when we give ourselves that moment of just, maybe it's like 3 breaths before a meal, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not, again, like, your eyes aren't closed, you're not making a big scene. You can do this when you're at lunch with a friend or a bunch of friends. Just, take a little pause, take a few breaths. No one has to know you're doing it.
Right.
You do that and you start bringing that intention of, okay, I'm making this choice to eat this food. You're tapping into your hunger. You're sort of starting the dialogue between the gut and the brain. Then you're out in the world and all of a sudden you're starting to feel, oftentimes when we have to make a choice or we're presented with something, we have like our gut instinct.
Right.
And a lot of times we get the first cue of this is what I should do. And then that's our gut. That's our, like, below the shoulders. And then we start to analyze it. And then we go, well, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. And then we're like all over the place. We can't decide. And then we decide we analyze it enough. We do make a second choice from the first gut instinct. And then we realize, damn, I should have done that first thing. That was the right thing to do. We're in it and we realize it. And so, part of it too is the more we start listening to that and kind of paying attention to the gut, and we can do that through the mindful eating and through the choice, the more we start to listen to that, the more we can be guided by that. And then that, the more we listen and we're guided, you can call it the gut instinct, you can call it the universe, you can call it whatever, but that's going to help us on the path of whatever it is that we're doing in our life, whoever we are, with or without, meditation or yoga or anything like that.
Right.
And that's the bottom line, because the more we're detached from that, the more we're going to put things in our body that are not necessarily going to serve us. They might be allergenic, they might be, lower the immune system, it goes on and on, like our relationship, because ultimately, one of the things I say a lot is like, we are up against a lot, right? Yes. We talked about the planet a little bit, but even, one thing I talk about a lot is like the food corporations. All the foods that they design in laboratories are extremely addicted. And we learned how to eat them, and we developed the neural pathways for loving them and feeling like they're our comfort foods when we were kids, most of us, right? Because, we saw the commercials and our parents bought them, or we begged our parents to buy them or whatever. And then all of a sudden we have this desire and this kind of need to have these things. And there's nothing about most of those processed foods that do anything good for us. In fact, they're part of the culprit of a lot of the disease that we're facing. So again, if you come back to mindful eating, it makes it easier to make choices that are going to be better for each of us, whatever those choices are, right?
You're right. And you know what? I think it's interesting because you hit a key word when you said design. And you made me think back, because I'm an 80s baby. So for me, Saturday morning, it was an awesome time for many of us 80s babies as children, because that was cartoon day. That was, you get your cereal, and you're there and you're ready to watch cartoons. And I recently was watching a Netflix documentary. It escapes me the name of it. I'll remember it. But it was interesting. They were talking about toys and cereals and foods of the 80s. And what shocked me was the fact of my beloved cartoons had been created to sell these things. So a lot of my favorite cartoons at the time, you know, going back to what you're saying about how certain things have been created by these corporations, designed, even my childhood great memories are almost products of this design from these corporations, you know, that sitting down, that great cartoon that made me want to get that toy or get that food, which now can affect us all in these times. So I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said designed, and it's been pre-designed for a very long time.
Yep.
So, I mean, I had to add that to that because I thought you already brought up the topic or hit the nail on the head. So with that, with understanding that now, the negatives of not practicing mindfulness when eating, what are some of the things that comes from that? What is it that we're developing when we're not practicing that kind of that, like you said, that gut instinct, that using that brain of, you know, and taking things in and really functioning and seeing what it is that we should be putting into our body? What are some of those negatives that can come from that?
Well, number one, you know, we're going to tend to overeat when we're not mindful eating, right? That's a big one, right? Mm-hmm. Number two, we're probably doing a, you know, chomp, chomp, swallow, right? And we were just, you know, back to the design, we actually only have, sometimes I ask this as a trick question when I teach, but we only have teeth in one place in our body. That's it. We only get one chance to create as much surface area for our food, for all of our enzymes and chemicals to access that, right? So if I'm just like chomp, chomp, swallow because I'm doing 2 or 3 other things at the same time, then I'm like not creating enough surface area. And, you know, my digestive juices like can't break down a nut. Like only my teeth can do that.
Right. Wow. I never thought of it that way. Wow.
Yeah. So if you think about it, so first of all, you know, we chew our food and then the food goes in our stomach. And I like to call the stomach like our pot. It cooks our food.
Okay.
And it's same kind of thing, like, and it's going to churn the food. And again, hopefully it's kind of liquefying our food, cooking our food. And hopefully we gave as much surface area as we could to our stomach to kind of churn everything. And that's the other thing, like we have to, number one, have all those enzymes come out. And again, the more mindful we are, the more we have. If we eat too much, we don't get all the churning, right? That can happen. So that's another piece. And slowing down and being mindful, we actually naturally will stop sooner. We'll get the signal of like, oh, I'm full, stop eating, right? So that's a big part of it. And then, you know, as I mentioned before too, when we are mindful eating, we're in that parasympathetic nervous system. And then when we're not, we're in more of the fight or flight, right? Again, we're not producing as much of the juices. So the lining of the gut is a little bit more, I would just say, compromised in general. It's interesting. I read this, I can't remember all the details, but I read this study. It was an Italian study where they had like college students eat and drink something, and then they had them eat and drink something while they were watching a movie. And they measured their blood levels of absorption of what they were eating and drinking. And it was, you know, I'm not going to get it right, but it was remarkable. It was like over 75% less absorption of what they just ate and drank when they were mindful versus when they were not mindful. So we absorb a lot more. Yeah. Okay. Pretty amazing. And, you know, the other thing I would say is just it helps us stay true to our goals, I think, when we're paying attention. You know, like, I'll just tell you, you know, around the I'm hungry, what am I hungry for, right? So I think a lot of people, what can definitely kind of impair our digestion, and also, you know, if somebody does have maybe weight loss goals or they want to eat that, or just that awareness, right? So I had my office like in a little nook in my kitchen, right? So a lot of times I'd be, you know, working and maybe making dinner or whatever. And one day I had a bag of granola just like sitting open on the counter. And every time I walked by, I would put my hand in the bag and grab a handful and just walk around and do whatever and just eat it. It was funny, actually. I was working on some mindful eating stuff, and all of a sudden I like noticed, you know, I gave myself that space. I'm like, what am I doing? And then I stopped and I said, am I hungry? And I was like, no, I'm not really hungry right now. So I said, okay, you know, and I put the last handful back. I closed up the bag. I threw it back in the cupboard. And I said, okay, I told myself, you can eat this later when you're hungry. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
And it was just that, right? That awareness of like, oh, I don't need to be eating. I mean, that's one of the things, and that, maybe we could talk about it another time, but like one of the things that it's like, what's the difference between snacking all day versus having meals, and why is that so important? And also, even how does that help our digestion to even work a lot better? And, when we're snacking all day, we're likely going to be snacking on, granola or like the cereal or maybe chips or, things that are not necessarily going to serve us the same way as, well, I sat down and have a meal. Look at this nice meal I made for myself, right?
Right. So it's interesting you're saying that, because you just made me think about something else, and the fact of dealing with the granola and how, you were taking it as you were working and things like that. I was thinking about commercials, and the fact of just how we're kind of almost, and I got to be careful how to say this, it's in our face all the time. So when I say commercials for different products, so it's like, if something is in your face, I think it's 3 times they say, if something is in front of you or you see something, you're going to investigate it. I think that's how the saying goes, or if something is in front of you or something like that. But I was thinking about that and the fact of what we are introduced to on a daily basis. As you said earlier, it's almost like an uphill battle. So commercials with fast food, on the TV or on our cell phones or even popping up on our computers when we're working and things of that nature, that makes that battle even harder, as well as the fact of it's kind of like it makes you quiet that mindful voice in your head, because it's like a subliminal thought, like, hey, here's a big blah, blah, blah food, in your face. Take this chip / whatever, being very careful what I'm saying. But, in that sense that, like you're saying, you're just eating. You're just putting something in your mouth. You're not thinking about it. You're just doing it, which can, I'm sure, lead to other things. It leads to other problems with the body. So it seems like, as with this conversation, mindful eating is more, it is that key word, mindful, in the fact of watching what you're doing, watching what you're putting in your mouth, how you're doing it, and the things that come with it. Mary, you have a book, am I correct? The Breakfast Report.
I do, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I have written, it's a free ebook on my website. And if you don't mind, I can just tell my website. It's called Occidental Nutrition.
Go for it.
And so my book is called The Breakfast Report. So I'm a big fan of breakfast. And part of that is, okay, nice. And a big part of that is just even because of how we are wired and how our hormones are working. So when I work with people, I love to talk about, I love to help people with the hormonal system. And maybe sometimes people think like, oh, my estrogen or testosterone. But really, our glands, our hormonal system, so everything from, our ovaries for women, testes for men, and our adrenal glands, and our pancreas that controls our blood sugar, and our thymus that controls our immune system, and our thyroid that controls the metabolism, and then the glands in the brain that, so we have these rhythms. We have all these hormones that are like our messengers. And this is what really keeps us balanced. So when I walk outside and it's cold, my hormones are going to activate to warm me up. When I'm hungry, my hormones activate so that all of a sudden I can feel my stomach starting to growl. And when we want to go to sleep at night, our hormones are regulated to be calmed down to allow us to sleep, right? So we have all of these hormonal systems that keep us in balance. And it keeps our metabolism in balance, our circadian rhythm, our adrenal glands to help us with energy. So basically, the Breakfast Report is saying what you eat and like how you eat and what you eat for breakfast can help to set up that system and regulate it. So it's about how do we eat the right breakfast that for your hormonal system and for blood sugar balance? Because oftentimes that's sort of the thing that happens is that we might be eating maybe more mindlessly and eating kind of what we want, or maybe not eating the right things. And our blood sugar starts to get imbalanced, meaning maybe our insulin's higher. Maybe we have high cholesterol, high blood pressure. Maybe we have gained weight, specifically around the middle. We're not sleeping well. All of those things are, we might say, okay, I need to eat differently to lose weight. But really, you want to change things so that your hormones get back in balance on the inside. And then you can start to maybe lose weight. And then you can start to sleep better. Then you can have more energy. So breakfast can set you up for that. And so it's about what you eat for breakfast and sort of how you balance your macronutrients, whether, and I focus more on proteins, fats, and fiber for breakfast. And I explain exactly why in the breakfast reporting, sort of so you understand how the rhythm of your hormones are working in the morning. And it's a great insight into how the body's working so that, again, knowledge is power. The more we know and the more we understand, the more we have more mindfulness of the choices that we make.
I'm actually downloading your book right now. So
very cool. Awesome.
Mary, first things first, thank you for joining us here again at the Day Left It podcast. Where can people contact you to find out more about what you're doing, ask you questions, download your book, or, maybe work with you?
Yeah. So my website is called Occidental Nutrition. And Occidental is the town that I live in Sonoma County in Northern California, and it means of the West. So Occidental Nutrition. I have a website there, and I also have an Occidental Nutrition Facebook page, and I do a lot of cooking on there. I do lots of cooking videos, which are really fun. And I also have an Occidental Nutrition YouTube station, which you can see some of my cooking as well, if you're maybe not on Facebook. And there, if you download my breakfast report, I'll keep letting you know about my upcoming events. I do some online stuff, and I do work one-on-one with people. So you can check it all out there. And then if you're interested, there's ways to reach out to me also on the website. Yeah, so I'm available to help people. Like I mentioned, I work a lot with the hormonal system, and I also really help people who are maybe diabetic or pre-diabetic. That's one of my specialties. When I help people who are struggling with sleep as well. So, lots of things that are, to me, I say, that all boils down to your metabolic hormones. Let's fix those from the inside out through your food and diet and lifestyle choices. And then oftentimes everything kind of comes back into balance for people. So I have a lot of fun.
Mary, thank you so much for joining us. I know, again, it's early for you, but you brought so much energy and a lot of information that I think our listeners are grateful to hear. I know I am, because it reaffirms what needs to be done in order for me to live my best life, as the young people like to say.
Yeah.
And really,
and Oprah.
That's right. And, and just kind of refocus on myself. I feel like that's something we're losing. We're taught to be selfish, but not in the balanced, proper way, and which I think is really dysfunctional. It's a shame, but I feel like with people like yourself, we're getting closer to where we came from. We're tying ourselves back in. So we greatly appreciate you for coming and being on the show this morning.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun to talk to you. So thanks.
All right. We'll be back with more from the Day Left It podcast.
Hey, Day Left Fit podcast listeners. Want to share your opinions, give feedback, or tell me what you're thinking? Send me a voice message. Voice messages are an easy way for you to send me audio that might end up in a future episode of the Day Left Fit podcast. They're the latest feature from Anchor, the platform I use to make this podcast. Here are some of the things I'd like to hear from you. Questions you may have for me, future topics, and or types of guests you would like us to reach out to. You can send me a voice message right now from wherever you're listening. Just tap the link in my show notes. I can't wait to hear from you.
It's time for another podcast excursion. Join us. We are the Della Fit Podcast.
Mindfulness, 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 mindfulness. Mindfulness is key, everyone. I'd like to thank Mary Sheila for coming on to the show, sharing her energy, sharing her experience and her knowledge with us, and to sort of reconfirm what we've been talking about already since the beginning of this year. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is key. I think that the more we continue to talk about mindfulness, the more we continue to have these conversations and to discuss just why it is so important for us to be mindful of our feelings, of ourselves. You know, sort of think of it as a systems check. You know, you take your car in for maintenance if you drive a vehicle, or, you know, if you have a computer, you know, you do a system analyst or, a systems analysis of what's going on. And it's about paying close attention to the device. Because why? Why do we want to pay close attention to the device? Why do we want to make sure and be mindful and have a analysis of what's going on, so that we can make sure that it continues to run like we need it to run? We do this with all sorts of mechanical devices. Why aren't we doing it with ourselves? Well, the answer is we've been doing this with ourselves, since we were physically formed in flesh. It's just that we have been taught not to do it. We've been taught not to pay attention to ourselves. We've been taught to focus on the outside of ourselves rather than what's going on inside. Don't pay that any attention. It doesn't matter. It's what matters, what's physically in front of you. You know, at one point, science, as it is taught today, used to deal with the fact of you cannot deal with what is not physically in front of you. That does not mean it's factual. We are learning that that is a lie. That what we can't see is actually more times important than what we can see, because what we can't see is the cause of what we do see. That's inside, that's spiritually, that's mentally, that's the whole shebang. So I want to thank Mary Sheila for coming on to the De La Fit podcast and sharing this information, sharing how this can help us with our eating habits, you know, and in turn, we're going to have more conversations like this and how they can affect us throughout our entire lives. But I want to just thank all you listeners out there and encourage you to continue to hit us up on the De La Fit podcast email, which is delafit13@gmail.com, as well as our website, which is www.delafitpodcast.com. Hit us up. Tell us what you think about what we're doing. Ask us questions. Send us comments. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. On Facebook, we are De La Fit Podcast. On Instagram, we are DE_LA_FIT Podcast. One word. Comment. Question. Bring up topics. We'll discuss it. You want us to bring a guest on the show? Hey, tell us who it is. We'll get at them. We are not afraid to invite anybody on the De La Fit podcast, as long as they are about helping humanity continue to progress in the positive. That's what it's about, everybody. Each one teach one, and the village, it is real. The digital family is real. We are connected to that divine Wi-Fi in the sky. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of the De La Fit podcast, and that you will continue to join us. As always, be safe, love yourself. The more you love yourself, the more you will love and treat others well. Peace.
You've been listening to the DelaFit podcast. Ta-ta for now.